Hello there. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I want to look at economics paper one of June 2022. And we are going to look at the question paper from the province of Gauteng. So, in terms of our instructions and information, we are just going to go through our instruction one, whereby it reads answer four questions as follows in the answer book. On the first part, we have got section A, which is, of course, a compulsory. And then we look at section B, we've got answer any two of the three questions. We've got a total of three questions on section B, and we are supposed to answer two questions. Then going to section C, there are two questions that are there, and you are supposed to answer one question. So this is what we have in terms of our information one. So moving on to the first part of our question, which is question one, we have got the multiple choice questions, whereby it reads various options are provided as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the answer and write only the letter A to D next to the question numbers. We've got question 1 to 8. Then on the first question, the remuneration or payment made for the use of factors of production which are limited in supply is called. We've got economic rent, we have got rent, commercial rent, and interest. So we are going to see that the correct response that we have is economic rent. Remember, economic rent refers to any payment made to the owner of factors of production in excess of the cost needed to bring that factor into production. So that is the description that we have in economic rent, which makes our A the correct response. So we're going on to question two. An economy where injections exceed leakages, the dash, we see that whenever we have got an injection, we've got an addition in the circular flow, and when we've got a leakage, we've got a reduction in the circular flow. So in this case, we have got additions being more than reductions. So obviously, it's going to have a final result of an increase, obviously, in the national income that we have in the economy. So we have that response on C, whereby we say national income increases. So we have C as the correct response. So moving on to the next question, which is 1.1.3. In a centrally planned economy, we have got different responses that we have, but we know that in a centrally planned economy, we have the government being the decision maker. So we go down according to the responses given. We see that the correct response that we have is A, which means that decision making is centralized. Centralized meaning the government is the one responsible for the process of decision making. So we are saying the correct response that we have is A. Then moving on to 1.1.4, the coronavirus disease 2019 was declared a pandemic by the, we have got different organizations that we have there, but we know that the World Health Organization is the one that is in charge of health issues in the world. So we have the World Health Organization as the correct response, which is our B. Then moving on to 1.1.5, it reads goods which are regarded as socially harmful are known as dash goods. We've got merit and demerit. We've got capital, public. But the correct response that we have there is demerit. Remember, demerit good, whenever we have got a demerit good, it is a good or service whose consumption is considered unhealthy, or we can call that that good is socially undesirable. So that is what we have. So that makes a demerit the correct response. So we go to the next part of our question, which is 1.1.6. In South Africa, parliament can be classified as we've got different responses, but the correct response that we have is the legislative arm of the state. So we have C. So moving on to 1.1.7, the term production in economics means obviously is these are the activities that provide the goods and services and to satisfy wants. So we are saying B is the correct response. We go to 1.1.8, marginalized groups are excluded from marginalized groups are excluded from. We've got society, politics, and protection, and the economy. But the correct response that we have is the economy, which is on our D. Remember, marginalized groups, these are groups or people who experience social, economic, or it might be political exclusion, or we can call it discrimination based on their characteristics, such as based on race. It can be based based on gender or sexual orientation, or also we can talk about basing on a disability. So those are the marginalized groups. So we move on to the next part of our question, which is on matching items. Choose a description from column B that matches the concept in column A. Write only the letter A to K next to the question number. In terms of column A, the first term that we have economic is economic growth, but we know that whenever there is economic growth, there is an increase in the market value of goods that are being produced in a certain country. There is a comparison from one period to the other. Then when we notice that there is an increase in the market value of goods that are being produced, we regard that as economic growth. Let's see according to the responses that we have. Uh, can try to check how we've got our responses that are ranging from A and going down to K. If you try to see according to the responses given there, we can see that we have got K, which is the increase in the production capacity of the economy over a specific period. So obviously, there has to be a period that is going to be used as the basis of comparison. Moving on to the next part of our question, which is going to be uh, the 1.2.2 socio-economic. I do know that socio-economic it relates to the society and the economy, and we have A as the correct response. So we are saying uh, on on 1.2.2, the correct response that we have is A. Then if you check 1.2.1 economic growth, we find our answer is K. So moving on to our next part of our question, which is going to be 1.2.3, economic rent, and we describe economic rent as any payment made to the owner of factors of production in excess of the cost needed to bring that factor into production. So this is economic rent. A typical explanation that we have in column B, we can try to see what we have, but if you go to G is saying payment made for the use of a factor of production which is limited in supply is the correct response. So we have put G. So if we go to this next one, we've got gross domestic expenditure. But we know that gross domestic expenditure, this is expenditure on the goods that have been produced in the economy. We check in terms of the responses given again. Which one do we have? So if you have J, you see that this it describes gross domestic expenditure, where we go to C plus I plus G, whereby C stands for consumption, I investment, and then we have got G, which is government expenditure. So remember, the differentiation that we can put in terms of gross domestic expenditure and gross domestic product is that gross domestic expenditure measures the total expenditure on the goods and services, whereby the GDP measures the total production of the goods and services. So basically, this is the typical difference that we can try to deduce between the two. Then we go to real flows, and so that real flows are associated with the goods and services. So we check according to that what we have. So we go to B. We have got B, which say the flows of goods and services. So we are saying on the real flows, we have got B. Then we've got 1.2.4, which we have identified as, we can just recheck, we've identified it as J. So we can as well indicate that we have got J on 1.2.4. So moving on to the next part of our question, which is 1.2.6, centrally planned economy. We have discussed earlier in terms of the centrally planned economy, whereby we are saying decision making is centralized and the government is the key player. So we check in terms of our responses, which one we can have, which matches that. If you go to see, resources are allocated by the government. So that one matches a centrally planned economy. So we have C as the correct response. Then you go to 1.2.7, which is the poverty line. The poverty line basically is the minimum amount of money needed to pay for basic needs. Obviously, it has to be the minimum line of the cost of living index. So we have I is the correct response. So 1.2.8 reads productivity. So it will see which one to match is productivity. But we know that productivity, if we define it from the context of labor, it is on average the production, the number of units that are being produced by the individual worker, which can be translated to say is the ratio of output to input. Whatever output is being achieved, what is the ratio to the input. So we have got E as the correct response. So with that, that is the end of our matching one section. We go to the 1.3, whereby we are saying give one term for each of the following descriptions. All right, only the term next to question numbers. So the first part reads resources that are scarce that people are willing to pay for. What are they called? So that is what we have. So we have to identify one term that can describe that. So you'd see that this is uh, according to responses that we have, we are going to see that these are economic goods. This represents economic goods. So you'd see that economic goods becomes the appropriate response that we have in terms of 1.3, 1.3.1. So we are saying we have economic goods as our response. So we go to our next explanation, which is production and prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned business. So we know that this is the market economy, or the free market economy. So we have that in our answer section as the market economy or the free market economy as our response. Moving on to the next part of our question, which reads, state-owned businesses like SABC and ESCOM, and we know that these are parastatals. So we have parastatals as our correct response, or we can call them state-owned entities. Then I'll move on to the next part, which reads, when something is short in supply or not readily available, this is a scarcity. Move on to the next part whereby saying this sector is associated with activities that include street sales and handicrafts. And this is the informal sector. So in terms of the next one, it says incomes given by the state to individuals or businesses for a specific purpose. We call that subsidies. So we have subsidies as the correct response. And this marks the end of our question one. Remember, our question one was supposed to be a compulsory, and it has a total of 30 marks. So with that, we can move on to the second part of our question, which is going to be our question two. So moving on to our question two, you'd see that our question two is on macroeconomics. It consists of 40 marks, and requires you to spend on average 30 minutes. So in terms of the first question that we have, it reads, name any two elements of two levels of government. I do know that we have got three levels of government that we have. The level of government that we've got the local, we have the provincial, and also we have got the national level. So according to the requirements of the question, you can choose two from the ones that we have. Then we move on to the second part of our question, which is why is the public sector important? It's obviously, it's because they provide the public goods and services. That is the main importance that we can talk about. And because the public sector provides much needed public goods and services, so we have that as our response. Then we move on to the next part of our question, which is now on data response, whereby readers start the table below and answer the questions that follow. Value added 2020 quarter three. So we move on to the table that we're given. We can try to go through and see what we have in terms of the figures that we have there. We've got the gross value added in the primary sector, gross value added in the secondary sector, gross value added in the tertiary sector. Then we've got the gross value added in basic prices. Then first question reads, which method of calculating gross domestic product was used above? And you'd see that this is obviously the production method. So this is production method, or we can call it the value-added method, as indicated in the other section. So move on to the next part of our question, which reads, uh, as of year 2020, which year is currently used as the best year by the SARB? So obviously, we know that the best year is any year that can be used as a reference that is before the year in question. So the year in question that we have here is 2020. So we're going to talk about any year that is before 2020. So within the context of our other section, we are given it as 2015. So we can talk about any year that is before 2020 can also be correct. Then we move on to the next part, which reads, briefly describe the concept gross value added, and we see that gross value added is a measure of the value of goods and services are produced in each stage of production. So this is the description that we have in terms of our gross value added. Then we move on to the next part of our question, which reads, what is the impact of a decline in primary sector activities on production? Obviously, the decline in the primary sector activities is going to adversely affect the activities in the economy. Economic activity is going to be negatively affected because all the sectors depend on the primary sector. Remember, that's where when the primary sector, that's where we're going to have the raw materials that are going to be used in the production processes. So we have that effect whenever we have a decline in primary sector activities. So the explanation that we have in particular, according to that, we are saying it will have a negative impact on production as production of depends on the extraction of raw materials from the nature. That is the first answer that we have. And the second part is saying production activities will decline. So this exactly is what we have. Then 2.2.5, calculate the percentage contribution of the secondary sector to the gross value added and basic price. So according to the figures that we have there, the percentage contribution of the secondary sector to the gross value added and basic prices. So we know that the secondary sector, we are given it is 945,944. And then we are given the gross value added basic price, which is 4,161,786. So obviously, we are going to say 945,944 over or divided by 4,161,786, and then we multiply by 100 over 1 to get the percentage. This is the typical calculation that we have in our section, and we are supposed to get 22.73%, which we can round off to the nearest percentage, which is to the nearest unit, which is the whole number. We get 23%. So this is what we have on this part. And then we move on to the next part of our question, which reads, we'll now move on to the next page where we've got our 2.3, which is study the extract below and answer the questions that follow. So we are given Ramaphosa encourages entrepreneurship among young South Africans. So Dinio Bentile, and then we've got the Johannesburg, we've got now contents of the extract whereby it says Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa says government is trying to reignite the spirit of entrepreneurship among young South Africans. The Deputy President has stressed not only the importance of seizing educational opportunities, but also of encouraging entrepreneurship. He has told young people that they have a large role to play in the growth of South Africa's economy. Ramaphosa spokesperson Tyrone Siu says, as we create these opportunities, we are doing so holistically. We are looking at them as total citizens and total social beings. So this is the extra that we are given. Then on the first part of our question is, set one other factor of production not mentioned in the extract above. So what is other factor of production not mentioned in the above? So we try to see what is the factor that has been mentioned in the extract above. But if you look here, you'll see that we have got the issue of entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, we know that is one of the factors of production. But we have other factors. We can talk about labor as a factor of production. We can talk about capital as a factor of production. So those are some of the factors. And land also is part of that. We are talking about land as a factor of production again. So those are the other factors that we can mention. So we go to other section and try to see what we have in terms of that. So we're going to see that we've got, we can talk about capital, we can talk about natural resources, which is the land, and talk about labor. So this is any of these responses can also be correct. So moving on to the next part of our question, which reads, before which year would this extract have been written? Before which year? And if you try to look in the extract given, you can going to see that we are not given any year there, but the question needs us to identify the year which would this extract have been written. So they are saying before which year. But if you come here, you would see that we've got Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. And we know that our Cyril Ramaphosa is the president currently in South Africa. So when was Cyril Ramaphosa a deputy is the question. And we know that Cyril Ramaphosa became president in 2018, so it's going to be before 2018. That's when Cyril Ramaphosa was the deputy president. So we are saying before 2018. So we have 2.3.2. There is our 2018. Then we go to the next part of our question, which reads, describe the term entrepreneur. And we know that an entrepreneur is someone who is starting to operate a business as an initiative. And we know that this entrepreneur is trying to make use of the factors of production that are there to produce those goods and services. So we see the description that we have in the other section in terms of the entrepreneur is that an entrepreneur is an agent that unites all means of production for production goals, or alternatively, we can describe it as the entrepreneur organizes or employs natural resources, capital, and labor into a profitable business to produce useful goods and services to satisfy the needs and wants of the consumer. So this is what we have on 2.3.3. Now we move on to the next part, which is 2.3.4. Why are educational opportunities important for entrepreneurship? So obviously, educational opportunities are very important as they are going to make the entrepreneurs be equipped with the knowledge that is required to operate their businesses. So we have also that articulated in our other section whereby we are saying uh, only through education will the youth be able to actively participate in the economy. So if you look at that point, only through education will the youth be able to actively participate in the economy. So that's the importance of educational opportunities. So we move on to the next part, which is saying uh, what is the difference between a successful entrepreneur and unsuccessful entrepreneur? So we have also that articulated in the section whereby we've got a table whereby other successful entrepreneur we are going to have a successful entrepreneur recognizes and identifies new profitable opportunities. Then a successful entrepreneur uses existing or old ideas and never looks at new methods or production methods. So that's the first difference. And the second difference is that other successful entrepreneur he has a clear understanding of what he or she wants to achieve. And then other unsuccessful entrepreneur, no clear vision or mission for the business. So these are the differences that we have. So if you look in terms of the number of marks that are involved, we have got 4 marks. Obviously, one difference is can make you get your 4 marks. Then lastly, we have got other successful entrepreneur persuades others to buy into their plans, and then unsuccessful entrepreneur cannot convince people to invest in the business or buy the product. So those are the differences that we can deduce between successful entrepreneur and unsuccessful entrepreneur. Then 2.4 differentiate between renewable and non-renewable resources. And we know that renewable resources are resources that can be replenished. We talk about plants, they can be replaced, they can naturally replace themselves. That is a renewable resource. When we talk about non-renewable resources now, these are resources that cannot be replaced easily. They can take a longer time to be replaced, or or they can take forever. We can talk about the minerals which cannot easily be replaced. We can talk about the issue of oils also as a non-renewable resource. So we have that difference also articulated in another section whereby we are saying a renewable resource are those that are replaced by natural processes or reproduce and replenish naturally without intervention within a short or medium time span. We can talk about weather, we can talk about rain, plants, animals. So that renewable resources, yes, we are having an example of minerals such as minerals, fossil fuels, and oil have to be used carefully because they do not have annual cycle of growth, but take millions of years to form. Then cannot be replenished itself, cannot replenish itself, or can take a very long time or to replenish itself. So those are the descriptions that we have in terms of renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Then in terms of the next question, obviously, which is going to be the last question that we have in terms of our question two, it reads, how is the South African government responded to COVID-19 social and economic impact? So our question has got 8 marks, and obviously it requires you to raise at least 4 points. So we are saying these are the intervention methods that were used by South African government that we need to put down in terms of the COVID-19 uh, in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic that were used then when we had the COVID-19. So we have also those listed in our other section whereby we are saying this is what transpired during the time. The Department of Social Welfare has provided a COVID-19 relief grant for the unemployed individuals. Is something that was put in place during the time. And also the National Coronavirus Command Council advises the President of the Republic when there is a need for lockdown restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country. The third one, the Executive Cabinet set up a solidarity fund where both the public and private sectors contribute to assist the South African public. We can go on and see in terms of the third point, which is the fourth point, which is the unemployment insurance fund, UIF, was made available for those who lost employment due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are some of the intervention methods that were used to try to address the negative effects of the coronavirus, which is a pandemic which hit unexpectedly. So this is what we have in terms of question two. So with that now, we can now move on to the next question that we have, which is going to be our question three. Moving on to our question three, which is on macroeconomics, and it has got 40 marks. It requires you to spend on average 30 minutes. So on the question, it reads, answer the following questions. First part, name two different economic systems. And we know that we've got various economic systems that we have. We talk about the centrally planned economy. We can talk about the free market economy and also the mixed economy. So those are the ones that we have. So moving on to the next question, why is it impossible for South Africa to become a rich country? It's because of the macroeconomic problems that face South Africa. We can talk about the issue of inflation as a macroeconomic problem, the issue of unemployment as a macroeconomic problem. So those are some of the reasons that we can bring to say they are making it impossible for South Africa to become a rich country. So we are saying inflation grows faster than wages is the first point that we have, and also productivity growth has performed very poorly. It has been slow, so it can also be another point alternatively that we can also include. Then at 3.2, cite the cartoon below and answer the questions that follow. So you're given a cartoon whereby we have got someone sitting under a tree, a cartoon which is holding a person which is written free market, and then we've got the other end whereby we've got free stuff, whereby beneath that it reads a big government approved. Obviously, it means we've got the government that is the key player there on the other end. Then beneath that we've got questions which says identify the economic system to which free stuff above refers. So on the free stuff, we see that we've got the government involvement, which represents a centrally planned economy. That is what we have on 3.2.1, whereby we are saying centrally planned economy or the command economy. So we have got that as our response. Then move on to the second part, which is saying what is the free market system free from in its purest form? So obviously, the free market system is free from government intervention. There is no government intervention in the free market system, so that is how it is free. So we have also that in other section where we're saying it is free from the government or state intervention. So we go to the next part whereby it reads briefly describe the term economic system. The economic system describes the way resources are allocated in the economy. That is the economic system. So we have that also, where we're saying it is a method used by countries to allocate their resources. That is the response that we have. Then we go to the next one. Explain the concept of an invisible hand in the economy. Invisible hand, it means these are the forces that are not adjusted by any party in the economy. but they adjust themselves automatically. We can talk about the forces of supply and demand, which decides the price. So we have no one who is going to set that price, but those forces automatically adjust themselves and set the price. So they become an invisible hand. So in terms of other section, it reads the invisible hand is a metaphor for the unseen forces that move the free market economy through individual self-interest and freedom of production and consumption. The best interest of society as a whole is fulfilled. So this is what we have. Then 3.2.5. Why is the South African economy regarded as a mixed economic system? Obviously, it's because it has a mixture of the centrally planned economy and the free market economy. That's why it is regarded as a mixed economy. So this is what we have for 3.2.5. And we move on to the other section to see what we have in terms of that explanation, whereby we have got uh, why South Africa is regarded as a mixed economic system. So the first point is saying the government plays a role in providing collective goods and services and in regulating the market. And we are seeing the part of the government on the first point. The second point, South Africa is a dual economy with a highly developed financial and industrial economy. Consumers have the freedom to decide how to spend their income and what to consume, describing the market economy. Then the government uses a sufficient monetary and fiscal policy to ensure maximum economic growth and continuous stability of prices. So the government involvement in the markets entails intervention to control prices to protect consumers and workers. So these are the explanations that we have in terms of the mixed economy. So we go to the next part, which is going to be um, our 3.3, which says start the graph below and answer the questions that follow. So you're given a graph. How did South African industries perform in the first quarter of 2019? So this is the graph that we have. Of course, it has two parts whereby we've got the left part and then the right part. Then within that first question reads, identify the industry which declined the most in the graph above. So if you talk about the industry that declined, obviously, we are going to, if you go to the left side, and that's where we have got our industries, and we are going to see that we have 13.2% indicating the greatest decline that we can see according to the information that we have there. So we have identified negative 13.2 here as our greatest decline, which is at the agriculture industry. So we have that, which supposed to mention in our certain way by saying agriculture, which indicates a negative 13.2%, representing the industry which declined the most in the graph that we are given. Then we move on to the next part, which is our second question, which is under which economic sector would construction be classified? Remember, construction, we are having the building of houses, the building of any structures that we can talk about falls under the construction, and we are going to see that under that industry, we are going to have a final product that is going to come. Is, for example, we are building a house, we're going to have a house at the end of it. So obviously, the final product is going to be there. So this indicates the secondary sector. So we have the secondary sector representing that. So we've got the secondary sector. Then we move on to the next part of our question, which is how will an increase in investment spending influence the economy? Obviously, when we have got investment that is taking place, it means there is expenditure that is taking place at that point in time. Of course, the expenditure is being done with an expectation of future benefits that are going to come from that expenditure that is taking place today. So, in terms of that, how can it influence the economy? Obviously, it's going to positively influence the economy. You're going to see the of um, reduction of unemployment, as we are going to see that investment also entails the opening of businesses. So those businesses are going to accommodate workers, and then employment goes down. So that is what we have in terms of the positive that we can deduce in terms of investment. We are also going to see infrastructure development taking place through investment. So those are some of the points that we can raise on 3.3.4. So we are saying expansion of the infrastructure development is one of the results of investment. Increase the employment, productivity, and production. Increase the economic growth, which will impact the economy positively. So this is what we have for 3.3.4. 3.3.5, we distinguish between reinvestment and financial investment. So with that, we can see what we have in terms of that between reinvestment and financial investment, whereby saying reinvestment or gross fixed capital formation is spending on addition to the capital stock, e.g., which is, for example, machinery structures and inventories. And then our second point is that it is undertaken with the aim of making profits in the future. That is the reinvestment. And we'll talk about financial investment is investment in shares and other financial instruments. It is an asset that you put money into with the hope that it will grow or appreciate into a larger sum of money. So this is what we have in 3.3.5. So moving on to 3.4. I briefly explain the economic importance of energy as part of South Africa's infrastructure. So energy obviously is going to be the source and that is going to activate any development that is going to take place in the country. So it becomes a very important. So we are going to say that energy is crucial to the functioning of the modern society. Large amounts of energy are consumed by industries and households. Industries cannot operate without power. And of course, that's true. And the loss of power for a short time can lead to huge losses of revenue to businesses in all sectors. So these are some of the points that you can raise, and you can see that on the next point, uh, the loss of power for a short time period can lead to huge losses of revenue to businesses in all sectors. And then using technology to generate electricity from renewable resource is one of the largest growth sectors. So these are some of the points that we can raise in terms of our 3.4. Then we move on to the last part, which is going to be our 3.5, which reads evaluate the government's involvement in increasing access to economic opportunities. So, how does the government increase economic opportunities? Is what we have on 3.5. So, we are saying um, the government has succeeded in increasing access to economic opportunities by removing legal restrictions that block the entry of blacks into the mainstream economy. So, the issue of giving a way for the marginalized groups that we have in the country is one of the ways. Then, second point is saying introducing policies to promote new opportunities for and increase the levels of participation of black people in the ownership, management, and control of economic activities. We're talking about the triple BEE, and then improving the provision of infrastructure, that is communication, transport, and electricity to poor areas. And the next point is decentralizing economic activities for previously historical disadvantaged areas through regional developmental programs. So these are some of the points that you can include in terms of 3.5, and you see that our 3.5 has got 8 marks. Obviously, at least 4 points are required on that point, on that question. We see that this is the end of our question 3 with a total of four marks. So and obviously, we need to move on to our next question. We're moving on to our question 4, which is also on macroeconomics. 40 marks requires you to spend on average 30 minutes. So on the first question, it reads, name and two examples of injections. And you know that whenever there's an injection, there is an addition into the circular flow, an addition of income in the circular flow. So we can talk about exports as an injection. As we export goods and services, we are going to receive money as an economy, and that money is going to be added in the circular flow. Then we have what also government expenditure is an example of injection. So with that, we can try to see according to our other section whereby we are talking about our exports, our government expenditure. We can also involve our investment. So with the ones that we are given, we can choose two that can be appropriate. Then I'll move on to the next part, which is why are intermediate goods and services excluded when calculating the value of GDP? Remember, intermediate goods, these are the goods that are used to produce other goods. So if we include them, they are going to lead to double counting. So this is exactly what we have. Including in the intermediate goods and services will lead to double counting, which will increase the GDP unrealistically. In other words, the figures that we have will be not a true reflection of what is on the ground. So we move on to the next part, whereby we are saying start the following diagram and answer the questions that follow. So we've got a diagram that we have there, and of course, it is showing the circular flow, and we've got participants that we can also have in the circular flow is also listed there. Then the first part of the question said identify one injection in the diagram above. So if you try to see, you'll see that we've got government purchases is also part of government expenditure, which is an injection. So that is what we have on that part. So we are saying government expenditure, which is being represented by government purchases. Then I will try to move on to the next part of our question, which says Name type of economy portrayed in the above diagram. So obviously, the type of economy is either we're going to have a closed economy or an open economy. A closed economy being an economy which is not engaging the foreign sector, whereby an open economy engages the foreign sector. So if you check there, it's that we do not have a foreign sector that is being represented. So it means it is a closed economy. So we are saying it is a closed economy as indicated on 4.2.2. Then we move on to the next part, which says um, describe the term as circular flow, and of course, a circular flow indicates the flow of income that we have in the economy with different participants that are going to be involved. So, in terms of the description that we have, it reads the circular flow model of the economy is a simplification showing how the economy works and the relationship between income, production, and spending in the economy as a whole. Then we look and go to the next question, which reads what is the main objectives of social transfers? And obviously, whenever we have social transfers, we've got a redistribution of income, whereby income is going to be transferred from the rich to the poor. So this is what we have on that part. So we are saying the main objective of social transfers is redistribution of income, that is poverty alleviation, to correct the imbalances of the past, to promote equality, to close the gap between the rich and the poor. So those are some of the reasons. The answers that we can also include. So we go to the next one, is saying, why is the factor market important in the circular flow? Why is the factor market important in the circular flow? Factor markets help the economy to grow by providing a mechanism where factors of production are traded. So that's what we have in terms of the factor market. The main importance of factor market is that it acts as a facilitation of the exchange of the factors of production. Then we have other points also that are correct that we can also include. Then we move on to the next part. We go to the next part, which is going to be a 4.3. Start the table below and answer the questions that follow. We are given final consumption expenditure by households at constant prices, 2010 prices in millions. We've got the durable goods section, we've got the semi-durable goods section. So in terms of our first question, it is identify one other classification of final consumption expenditure by households not mentioned in the above. So you see that these are durable goods that are only included, but we can also have non-durable goods that we can also include. So we are saying non-durable goods is the one that is not being included. We go to the next part, which reads, what is the trend of the value of other durable goods since 2012? So other durable goods, if you check according to the table given, we are having it here in this row. And then the trend, obviously, is a movement that we have from 2012 going to 2013 and going to 2014. But if you analyze the figures that we have there, we have got 9,236, which is moved to 9,928, which is also moved to 10,313, which is obviously indicating an increase. So we are saying the trend is increasing. So this is what we have on that part. We are saying increasing is our response. We'll move on to the next part, which is saying describe durable goods. So of course, durable goods, these are goods that are going to last for a longer time period. So that's what we have on durable goods. On average, we are saying that are going to last for more than a year. So we come here, we say it involves those goods that last for more than 1 year, goods that last for a long period of time. That is durable goods. And then we move on to the next part, which is 4.3.4. Explain what is meant by the term constant prices in the table above. So we are saying constant prices, obviously, these are prices before adjustments are made in terms of inflation. So this is what we have in terms of constant prices. So we're saying the value of household expenditure before inflation, the unadjusted value of household consumption expenditure. So that is at constant prices. And then we move on to the next part, which is saying, why is the final consumption expenditure per household important in the economy? So we are saying households are the most basic units in the economy since they consume goods and services while also providing factors of production. So they consume the goods and services, and also they provide factors of production in the form of labor. So that's why the final consumption expenditure per household is important in the economy. So that's what we have on 4.3.5. And then we go to 4.4, explain the difference between final goods services and intermediate goods and services. So final goods and services, obviously, these are the goods that are going to be consumed, and then intermediate goods and services are going to are the goods that are used to produce those final goods and services. So that is what we have on 4.4. We are saying on final goods and services, we have got many descriptions that we have there, whereby saying are goods and services that are bought by the ultimate user to satisfy a need or want, and the buyers of these goods and services have no intention to further transform these goods and services to resell. So final goods can never be further transformed. They are final. So that's the sale of final. We have other descriptions that we have in terms of final goods and services. But if you go to intermediate goods and services, you are saying intermediate goods and services are those goods and services that are used uh, in the production of other goods and services. In order to produce final goods and services, intermediate goods are combined and processed. So that's how we can come up with that differentiation. Moving on to the last question that we have says, how can the final consumption expenditure by government improve the standard of living? So we would want to see how does it improve the standards of living. So first of all, issuing of social grants closes the gap between the rich and the poor. So that's very clear. As we have the income that is going to be taken from the rich through the main instrument of taxation, and then it is redistributed to the poor through the issue of government expenditure. That is, for example, through grants. So, next point: construction of infrastructure leads to employment opportunities, and also provision for free education improves the literacy and numeracy rate. Provision of quality health services will improve the standard of living because people will be healthy and productive. So those are some of the points that we can raise in terms of our 4.5. So this is the question 4 that we have according to this question paper. Now, moving on to our section C, whereby we are going to look at essay question 6, which is on macroeconomics. The first part reads, discuss the characteristics, advantages and disadvantages of a country having a mixed economy with 26 marks. And then on the second part, which is the additional part, analyze the problem that South Africa is facing with too much government involvement in the economy. So this is what we have. And then we see that our question has got a total of 26 marks plus 10, and which is obviously going to give us uh, a total of 40 marks. Of course, we've got the introduction. We also have the conclusion, which is going to make our total marks go to 40. So remember, this is an essay, so we're going to start we're going to start with our introduction, and then we go to the main part, and then we're going to finish with our conclusion. Then, in terms of our introduction, these are the requirements. A good starting point would be to define the main concept related to the question topic. If there is need of a clear main concept that we have in the question, you can try to define it and come up with your introduction. And then do not include, these are some of the points to note, do not include any part of the question in your introduction, and also do not repeat any part of the introduction in the main body. Avoid saying in the introduction what you are going to discuss in the body. Very important to take note in terms of these requirements. And then we'll go to the main part there that you also need to go through. Then finally, we've got a conclusion, which can be a brief summary of what has been discussed without repeating facts already mentioned. Any opinion or value judgment on the facts discussed. Additional support information to strengthen the discussion, or a contradictory viewpoint with motivation if required. So also you can come up with a recommendation. So these are requirements. So this is what we have. So in terms of our question, if you go back to our question, that we are going to start with the main part whereby it reads discuss the characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages. So obviously, you're going to start with characteristics of a mixed economy. So you can try to define a mixed economy in an introduction. That can also be a perfect introduction that we can have. So in terms of the mixed economy, remember mixed economy has got both the centrally planned economy and also the market economy being inside that economy. So we have a mixture. So what are the characteristics? So the characteristics are going to be defined on the basis of both characteristics of a centrally planned economy and then the characteristics of a free market economy or the market economy. So this is what we have. So in terms of the characteristics, this is what we have. We can have motivation as the main basis of the characteristics, whereby we're saying in the private sector of the mixed economy, consumers and producers are assumed to be motivated by self-interest.
that is the private sector. But if you go to the public sector, it is assumed to be motivated by the necessity to satisfy the social needs of the community. So you'd see that all the descriptions we are putting both the private and the public because we have got an integration of the market economy and the centrally planned economy. Then in terms of ownership, consumers, producers, and organizations own most of the factors of production. The state owns enterprises such as Transnet. So you see now, on consumers, on the first part, consumers, producers, organizations own most of the factors of production, describes the market economy. Then on the second part, the state owns enterprises such as Transnet. We are now talking about the centrally planned economy. Then in terms of competition, the same thing. We are going to come up with that, and we are going to see that there is competition under the. So this is what we have, and then we can talk about the basis of competition. You can also talk about the state intervention as a characteristic. We see that there is state intervention in the central plant. Then in the other market, we do not have state intervention. Then we move on to advantages of the mixed economy. You can talk about the private sector. We've got private ownership, the profit motive, and combating the forces that ensure the production of great variety of goods and services, which is an advantage. And then under public sector, again, what is an advantage? There's protection, education, healthcare, social benefits and opportunities for the poor are provided. The public sector handles the market failures by providing infrastructure and creation of a